First, I would like to apologize for an egregious error on the website, which was pointed out by alert student Amritpan Kaur here. Thank you, wherever you are. The section times were wrong in the header on many pages. They were correct on the contact information site. But the sections are on Mondays and Thursdays. Okay? The information on the website is right now. But I'm sure that had something to do with the relatively low turnout of sections this morning. So that was very lonely. There's not much we can do about that. We can't make them up on Wednesday because the room is taken. So there will be a section on Thursday. I'm sure that everybody was planning on Thursday anyway. Be all right. We'll just have to make do. Okay, second thing, lab. I will give some time at the end. Actually, let me see a show of hands. Who does not have exactly 2 lab partners? In other words, who's not in a group of 3? Okay, I'll give some time after class today. I promise this time I really will. And although you'll warn me when we're 5 minutes at the end. Okay. So we'll give you time and be able to make some new friends. Okay, so be ready to schmooze. There is a class after us here, so we'll schmooze in the hall. Okay. Okay. For this week, there's a few things that you need to read. All of them are short. There's an example lab report, a document called Rules and Expectations, and a grading rubric. These are things that will be covered in section as well. And if you have questions, you can send us an email. Be happy to clarify. This is how the labs work. And you just have to learn it once because there are 4 labs and they all work the same way, more or less. There's a small reading for Wednesday by a guy named Hacklut, and that we'll talk about how that. I'll talk a little bit about how that reading fits in. But it's very short, but it's a very difficult read because it was written in 1570 something. Okay, so it's nominally in English, but not really. Don't sweat that. Don't try to look up every silly word. Just try to get the gist of it. What is he proposing? This is a proposal for a certain kind of colonization, and we're going to talk about how the colonies come out. We're going to spend some time on the colonies. But this is Hacklut's view. This is his looking ahead at what he thinks England should do. And we want to compare that to what actually happens. So just get a rough idea of what he's talking about. Okay, and then for Friday. Vogel and Egerman chapter 2 is also downloadable. It is this is the basis for the lab. Okay, so it doesn't follow the narrative of the course. He's going to be talking about slaves in the 1850s, 1860s, right, which is a topic you're going to become very familiar with shortly. But nonetheless, it's also quite short. I don't think I'm actually asking you to read all of it; it's just a few pages. But it'll be handy if you have a look at that by Friday, because I will refer to it. Okay? And all the above are at the course website. Okay, are there any questions about that? Okay, where we left off, are there? Okay. Oh yes. Yeah. There was nothing to be read for today. You're all off the hook. But good for you for reading ahead. Yes, second question. I believe we will start with them next week. You only need to get Daniels. Daniels is the one we're going to be reading first, and we'll start. He's going to start talking. He talks about the colonial period, and we'll use him for that. Okay. So the reading is not reading load is not entirely heavy yet, and it really won't ever get to be terribly heavy. Yes.
I'm sorry, but how do the sections work?
They're optional. If you could, once you write, well, do you have a specific question about it, or do you want the whole general idea? Well, they're discussion sections, and I think the key things about them is that they're going to focus more on the labs than on the material of the lectures. Right? So they're more about how to get the labs done. And as such, you'll want to make sure that your lab group is at least represented. It's not essential that everybody go to every section, but you'd be wise to send a member of your group to every section. And I think once you go to one, you'll see how they work. And yeah, we'll see how they work once you start going to them. All right. I'm sorry, I hope that answers the question. Please send email if there's still mysteries there. Other? Oh, yeah. You can certainly get them online. They're all in print and not expensive. Sorry, the bookstore sold out. They don't listen to me. Okay, then let's start. Last time, we talked about the New World and how the way the New World was settled over the land bridge, and because of certain advantages that the Eurasian landmass had in the way of geography and availability of domesticatable plants and animals, Europe and Asia got a head start of about 5,000 years in the development of agriculture and hierarchical societies and technology for war and disease. And all of those things played a role. I argue that the main role was played by disease, and because of that, the inhabitants of the New World after 1492 suffered an unparalleled, or I should say an unprecedented demographic disaster. We know the population, we don't really know how bad it was, but some historians suspect that the die-off may have been as high as 90%. Now, while that demographic disaster was unprecedented, it was not unparalleled, if I can split a hair. And I think I mentioned this at the end of the last lecture. Europe also suffered demographic disasters. And in particular, in 1347, 1348, the Black Death swept through Europe and killed off between a third and a half of the population, and that varied quite a bit from place to place. So Europe was no stranger to this sort of devastation either. But there are big differences. In the case of the New World, along with the diseases came a population that was all too eager to take over and exploit and enslave and so on. And so for those who survived the disease onslaught in the New World, there was nothing to look forward to pretty much besides slavery. On the other hand, in Europe, those who survived the Black Death, the plague of the 1340s, actually had some upside. The golden age of microbes, to which this period has been referred, we're talking now about the flat part of the second hump of human history, that is the agricultural revolution, the period when lots of marginal land is under cultivation, people are pretty much at carrying capacity, and so you get a lot of diseases and plagues, diseases and famines as lots of people are dependent on weather and so forth. So it's that wiggly part of that second hump, if you remember. The plague was simply a very big, steep downward bump. But the massive death, of course, resulted in a lower population. And with land fixed and technology very labor intensive, that meant that the golden age of microbes was also the golden age of labor. And one of the positive consequences for Europeans in that period, at least the Europeans who survived the plague, was that serfdom, at least in Western Europe, came to an end, simply because the demand for labor was such that the owners of land had to bid against each other. So quite the opposite of what happened in the New World. Where the New World's survivors became slaves, the Old World survivors became, well, not quite free, but more free than they had been. The devastation of the Black Death is also a contributing factor, certainly not the only one, but a contributing factor to the Renaissance. So you'll see that the Renaissance, which is rather a new way of thinking, also contributed to later growth of economic power as well as other kinds of power. Europe also has its roots kind of in that decline. So with that, let's take a look at the main points in the outline. The story that I want to cover today and Wednesday are these. These are the main points. That in Europe, during the early modern period, and that's the period, it's always kind of tough to be real specific about what these periods are. The early modern period is, for me, it's the period after 1492 and up to about the French Revolution. Okay? That's the sort of time frame that I'm interested in today. And the early modern period was characterized by conflict and change. I think I sort of hinted at that already, but I want to go into the details. And that's mostly what we'll do today. On Wednesday, I want to focus on England. England was also going through this early modern period, and it also changed, and it also encountered lots and lots of these conflicts. But I'm going to argue that England was a little different. The way things broke in England gave it some very important advantages, and we'll see that the way that works explains, or at least describes, the way in which England becomes the dominant power in the world, really after in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Okay? Even though, for reasons that we'll go into, they get off to a rather late start. Okay, so today it'll mostly be Europe, Wednesday it'll be England, and then on Friday we'll turn to the lab and we'll be talking about slavery in the United States. So what we'll do in more detail here, is sort of the geopolitical overview. I'm going to start by talking about the Italian city-states. Okay, these are the places where, on the Mediterranean, where power was concentrated at the end of the medieval period. And for reasons that we'll talk about shortly, their power begins to wane. Okay? And they're replaced by Portugal and Spain. Portugal and Spain, for reasons, again, that we'll talk about shortly, overtake the Italian city-states, largely by finding these new routes to the east. Right? And each one, Spain and Portugal, each pursue a different one, a different strategy, both for finding routes. They find different ways of getting to the east, and they pursue very different strategies. Portugal becomes, as we'll see, a trading empire, whereas Spain a more exploitive sort of empire. Then the Reformation comes. Reformation is the development of Protestantism. Okay? And that, as we know, starts in 1517 with Luther's promulgation of the 95 Theses. But it's much more complicated than that. It develops in lots of different ways in different places. And the way it develops in England, in particular, will be part of our story for later. But today we'll get kind of the big outline of the Reformation. It turns out to be, as you'll see, quite important. And then finally, we'll talk about how Spain declines, which is an interesting story because even though at one point Spain is a remarkably huge country, it is the Habsburg Empire. So it not only includes two continents in the New World, but also includes a huge part of Europe. And yet with all of that power, Spain goes rapidly into decline. And despite all of the wealth that they extract from the New World, the Spanish don't wind up being the rulers of Europe a century after the discovery of the New World. Right? And again, we'll get to it. Okay, so that's the big overview. Italian city-states, the end of the medieval period, very powerful. They start to fail. They're overshadowed by Spain and Portugal. Reformation shows up, and Protestants in the north ultimately undermine Spain's domination. Okay? So, first, let's go back. A little about the Italian city-states. The focus of power in Europe at the end of the medieval period, as I said, was the Mediterranean. The main reason for that was because of trade with the East. And of course the Italians, and when I say the Italians here, I mean the people who lived in the Italian peninsula. There's no nation state of Italy at this point. That won't happen until the late 19th century. At this point, Italy is composed of city-states, like Florence and Venice, for example. And those city-states are quite powerful because, at least largely, because during the Crusades, they carefully followed the Crusaders over to the Levant and made friends and set up trading posts. And so, as a result, by the end of the medieval period, we're talking about in the 1300s and 1400s, Venice in particular has virtual monopoly on trade in spices and luxury goods with the East. That trade is, of course, carried on over land, right? Because nobody knows how to get there by boat just yet. Nonetheless, this is a very valuable trade for them. The markups are huge, and the value-to-weight ratios are very favorable. So it actually makes sense to carry pepper on a human or a mule's back all the way across Afghanistan and so on. But in the later 1400s, after about 1450, the Ottoman Empire begins to go on a binge of conquest under Mehmet the Conqueror. In 1453, the Ottomans take Constantinople, and by 1480, they take Oronto in Italy. They actually get a foothold in Italy. And the Ottomans become the new middlemen, and they pretty much squeeze the Venetians out of the trade. So by the middle of the 1400s, this trade with the East is beginning to dry up, and that is, of course, bad news for the Italians. Now, the Italians are still rich because they've been doing this for a while, and with all that money, all that money makes all that wealth makes Italy the natural place for the Renaissance to start. Why the Renaissance starts is a question I can't really answer, other than to say that as a demographer, that the rapid population decline of the earlier century made a lot of things much less certain. It's also true that the church behaved rather poorly after the plague, or even during the plague. The plague doesn't actually stop after 1348. The plague returns to Europe several times, just as smallpox and all the nasty diseases return to the New World as well. But all of these things make people question the dominant order of things. And that's particularly important because the dominant order is really rigid. And I'd like to turn to that now. Rather than define the Renaissance right away, I want to talk a little about medieval thought. And I think based on that, we'll be able to see what there is to the Renaissance itself. So this is an illustration from 1579, and it is something called the Great Chain of Being. This is an idea that I think the church favored quite a lot, but it's a very good summary of how people thought in the Middle Ages. It's hard, of course, to see exactly what's going on. But the guy at the top there, that's God. Okay? And running down the middle, here's a chain. And the idea is very simply that up is good and down is bad. Okay? So at the top we have God. Beneath God are the first sphere, which are the heavenly counselors. And they are seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, for example. And below them are a different kind of angel. And finally, below all those angels, we have mankind right here, and I believe Jesus is right there in the middle. And that's where that's the place of man in this hierarchy, right in the middle. Above humans are the angels, and below us are birds and fish and other kinds of beasts and trees and rocks and worms and slugs and down all the way to hell. So humans in this position are just halfway between beast and angel. That's kind of the way they're thought of. But what's really important about this picture is that humans are supposed to stay there. That the idea is that God figured out how the world is supposed to be, and he made it that way, and you better not mess with it. It's this way for a reason. You may not understand it, but to mess with this hierarchy is heresy. It's a crime. And that's not just, in the big picture, it's not just humans deciding to be birds or something like that. This is the big great chain of being, but this big great chain of being implies all kinds of little ones. So while we've got God, angels, man, beasts, and so on, in the state, we have the king, and we have the nobility, and we have the gentry, and we have the various grades of common folk down to the poor folk. And it mirrors this exactly, and the same rules apply. You don't change place. This society is really obsessed with everybody being exactly where they are. Among the nobility, there are lots and lots of gradations. We'll talk a little about those when we talk about England next time. But even within the gradations, there are gradations. It's the year in which your ancestor was given this knighthood or this earldom, made, that determined your rank, and that determined where you stood at certain state functions and so on. It's all hierarchical. This is reflected, to some extent, in the way education and intellectuals in general behaved. The dominant paradigm at this point was called scholasticism, right? And that's going to be replaced in the Renaissance with something called humanism. And I'll contrast those in a moment. But scholasticism is a very is a method of teaching that was very, very structured. Okay? There were these so-called lectios in which the professor read certain text, and then there were disputios in which so-called debates were held, but they were all very well scripted, very well structured, and of course the professor always won. Certain aspects of education haven't changed all that much. But scholasticism stressed the authority. It didn't stress the idea that you should think about things. It did not stress data in particular. It stressed the authority and the authority of text, and usually the focus of interest was on reconciling some text with the Bible. Right? So you find something in some text, and it didn't immediately seem like it was part of the Bible, and then you just rifle through the Bible for some obscure passage that made it all line up. That was the idea. For context, this is very, very, very alien to somebody who, I shouldn't say alien, but Copernicus, who, as we know, wrote in 1543. So into the Renaissance, a little ways into the Renaissance. He wrote on the revolutions of heavenly bodies. And then in 1632, Galileo, who supported Copernicus' view, was convicted of, he was held to be vehemently suspect of heresy and was under house arrest for the rest of his life. So so people like Copernicus, people like Galileo, are a big threat. They're not just different. They don't have just a different way of thinking. They have a very different way of thinking. Right? And that's the sort of thing that's going on. So this rigidity of thought is, I don't want to say quite replaced. All the ideas of the medieval period don't just end when the Renaissance rolls into town. All these periods, when we characterize a period of intellectual thought, like the Renaissance, obviously the dates are very fuzzy. Renaissance painting is sometimes thought to begin in the 1200s. But let's not worry about that too much. The idea is that all these ideas overlap, and we'll see the great chain of being persists. This way of thinking persists well into the early modern period. Yes? No, it was very stressed very much the classics, very much like the Renaissance does too. Yeah, it was not a period of generating. Most of what they generated were these treaties and why the classical authors did or didn't agree with the Bible, and of course they always did. But I don't mean this to imply that this medieval period was completely without thought or progress either. That's an idea that really comes from the Renaissance. In fact, the idea of the medieval period is an idea of the Renaissance. The historians of the Renaissance are the ones who decided that there was this period that was just coming to an end now. And we'll be starting this rebirth presently. There were some historians see much more continuity than a break there. But certainly there are new ideas coming about, and there are certainly new ways of looking at things. And one of them is humanism. Renaissance humanism is how those two words are very frequently used together. And Niccolo Machiavelli is certainly one of them. I have a quote from him in a moment. In fact, why don't we take a look at the quote first, because it's somewhat interesting, and then we're going to go back in the other order. So this is Niccolo Machiavelli, who I am claiming is a humanist. And I'll read this to you so you can just close your eyes and go sleep. Among the princes of our time, Ferdinand of Aragon, the present king of Spain, may almost be accounted a new prince, since from one of the weakest he has become for fame and glory the foremost king in Christendom. And if you consider his achievements, you will find them all great and some extraordinary. In the beginning of his reign, he made war on Granada. Ronald Reagan made war on Grenada, right? Which enterprise was the foundation of his power. At first, he carried on the war leisurely. I like that sense. At first, he carried on the war leisurely, without fear of interruption, and kept the attention and thoughts of the barons of Castile so completely occupied with it that they had no time to think of changes at home. Meanwhile, he insensibly acquired reputation among them and authority over them. With the money of the church and his subjects, he was able to maintain his armies. And during the prolonged contest, to lay the foundations of that military discipline which afterwards made him so famous. Moreover, to enable him to engage in still greater undertakings, always covering himself with the cloak of religion, he had recourse to what may be called pious cruelty in driving out and clearing his kingdom of Moors. Then which exploit none could be more wonderful or uncommon. Using the same pretext, he made war in Africa and invaded Italy and finally attacked France. So a couple of points here. And when we read this, I think Machiavelli is still in print. He is he's well known. I'm sure that you've heard some of his famous aphorisms, such as "It's better to be feared than loved." What he wrote, this is the context of a manual, a book called The Prince, which is an instruction set to a new Renaissance modern prince. And what's interesting about this, and what I